Good afternoon. Thank you for joining the Minister of Labor and me today. As the coronavirus continues to profoundly impact our lives, the government of Bermuda remains focused on the necessary work to ensure that Bermuda remains safe. Additionally, we continue the work required to provide a safety net to those persons and businesses who are experiencing financial difficulties as a result of the pandemic. In my remarks today, I will cover three areas. They are as follows: redundancy payments at Fairmont Southampton Hotel, the government's supplemental unemployment benefit, and our economic performance in 2020 and the outlook. Let me start with the Fairmont Southampton Hotel redundancy payments. In particular, I would like to address a number of questions that have arisen over the course of the last couple of days in the media and generally surrounding payments in the absence of an agreement with Gencom or their subsidiary, West End Properties Limited. First, some background. As previously advised, the government of Bermuda put into action a plan to pay the workers directly. These are people who had been made redundant, were due redundancy pay, and after not receiving their payments as promised, urgently required funds to provide for themselves and their families. We had advanced about $9.7 million, or 89% of a total amount due of approximately $11 million. This included payments made to 552, or 82%, of the 671 former employees that were due redundancy payments and offered advances by the government. The timing of any future or further advances is completely subject to any remaining employee documentation. Now, I'd like to deal with the legal position surrounding our action. Section 33 subject to Section 232 of the Companies Act of 1981, expenses of liquidation, but notwithstanding Section 236 of that Act, priority of creditors, or any other enactment on the winding up of an employer's business or the appointment of a receiver, the claim of an employee to wages and other payments due under his contract or under this Act shall have priority over all other creditors, including the Crown. Prior to making payments to these employees, we took advice from leading UK and Bermuda counsel on the impact of the Employment Act. The agreements entered into by each employee prior to their payment are likewise designed with the statute in mind. Following expiry of the November 20th deadline that Gencom had provided for making the payments, and after a week of hearing no proposals from them with respect to effecting these payments, lawyers representing the employees will issue a statutory demand requiring payments of the amounts outstanding from West End Properties Limited. If no arrangements are made with respect to the payments, the employees' lawyers are free to apply to the Supreme Court of Bermuda on the basis that the company is unable to make its payments when they are due. As we've demonstrated previously, the government of Bermuda is willing to use the full extent of the law to protect the interests of the people of Bermuda. Considering the potential position we are in, we have begun work on how the project could proceed in the absence of a transaction with Gencom, and have looked at the potential to partner with other equity and debt investors, including Bermudian investors and lenders, so as to get the project back on track. An additional option under consideration might be a scaled-down renovation plan to reduce capital requirements and potentially the closure time. While we remain at a preliminary stage and nothing has been finalized, we are examining the options and will proceed in the best interest of Bermuda if need be. What is clear from the steps that we have already taken, however, is that the burden of that uncertainty will not be placed on the shoulders of the employees subject to redundancy, who are worse placed to bear it. Some commentators have questioned whether the loan arrangements with the former Fairmont Southampton employees ushers in a new precedent where the Bermuda government stands to make payments on behalf of troubled companies. To be clear, it does not. The Fairmont Southampton is an iconic property and an essential component of the available beds and conference facilities that support Bermuda tourism and the airlift that we as a country currently enjoy. We are committed to seeing this project through and are prepared to do so without Gencom if necessary, if they cannot stand behind the obligations they have. On the issue of redundancy payments in Fairmont Southampton, let me conclude by saying that underlying all of the analysis that was conducted was an awareness of the painful impact the failure to pay the employees would have on them and their families. In addition to being placed in the unenviable position of losing their jobs and not being paid the amounts due to them under the law, they would have had to pursue their rights through a legal system few could afford to navigate. Accordingly, the Bermuda government decided to step in, pay the employees, and then allow the legal process to follow its due course. Any funds paid to the employees' lawyers would be directly remitted to the Bermuda government in satisfaction of the loans each employee received a payment for, having entered into prior to payment. Now, moving on to the supplemental unemployment benefit. The public will recall that when the 18-week unemployment benefit concluded, the government quickly introduced a supplemental unemployment benefit. The purpose of the supplemental unemployment benefit was to provide payments to individuals who did not qualify for financial assistance, but for whom it had been determined through a means test that they required income assistance from government. The amount is not intended to cover all living expenses. It is designed to be supplemental income. The intention is to prevent recipients from being reliant on the benefit long term, but to provide temporary support that allows persons to be retrained, to seek employment, and to transition into a new job. The means test is administered by the Department of Financial Assistance, while the Ministry of Finance team administers the payment via the unemployment benefit direct payment system. The Department of Financial Assistance provides a monthly list to the Ministry of Finance. The supplemental unemployment benefit will be paid once a month, and the program will run until the 31st of March of 2021. Recipients must immediately notify government when they commenced any form of employment, as they would no longer be eligible. The supplemental unemployment benefit pays recipients with health care $1,520 per month and $1,950 per month to those without health insurance. All persons without health insurance have been placed on the government-operated health insurance plan. Thus far, just over $267,000 has been paid to about 60 persons in the program. In addition, approximately $50,000 has been paid on insurance premiums. We want to ensure that those persons in our community that need assistance receive it. Therefore, if members of the public who have been laid off, lost their job, or working substantially reduced hours due to COVID-19, and they require financial assistance, I would encourage you to reach out to the Department of Financial Assistance so that an officer can assist you with the application process. The economic impact of the pandemic on public health measures required to suppress COVID-19 has caused severe reductions in Bermuda's economy during the first half and the borders. The ministry expects economic activity to increase during the second half of 2020. With the resumption of greater levels of commerce, there is now increased focus on sustaining the economy and building on the ongoing work to stimulate the economy. As previously advised, considering the impact that COVID-19 was having on all sectors in the Bermuda economy and the projected levels of unemployment, the Ministry of Finance, working with the Caribbean Regional Technical Assistance Center, CARTEC, and another consultant firm, revised our original GDP growth forecast for 2020 from 1% to 2% of growth to -7.5% to -12.5%. This was a preliminary projection based on reasonable assumptions and was primarily dependent on how long the intensive but very necessary suppression measures remained in force. Summary economic indicators for 2020 are as follows. The year to date, that's through July, average inflation rate as measured by the Consumer Price Index was 0.2%, and the 12-month average was 0.5%. This compares to an average CPI of 1% for both the year-to-date and the 12-month periods for July 2019. Imports decreased by 27.5% over the first 2 quarters of the year to register at 437 million. Air arrivals during the first 2 quarters of 2020 fell by 81%, while the number of cruise ship passengers fell by 96% over the same period. Total visitor arrivals were down by 91% versus a year ago. Total air visitor spending in the first 6 months fell by 152.8 million, or 82%, settling at 32.7 million. The estimated value of construction work put in place was $58 million, a reduction of 57.5%. And based on preliminary estimates from the Office of the Tax Commissioner, employment income for the first 9 months of 2020 fell by 194.2 million to 2.528 billion, a decrease of 7.1% when compared to the first 9 months of 2019. Total retail sales for the first 7 months of 2020 decreased by 6.4%, or 45.3 million to register at $657.9 million. 503 new international companies and partnerships were registered in Bermuda during the first 9 months of 2020, representing a 5.7% increase when compared to the 2019 registrations of 476. And Bermuda's balance of payments over the first 2 quarters of 2020 recorded a surplus on the current account of $453 million, which was $100 million greater than the corresponding surplus in 2019. The increase in the current account surplus was due in large part to the $167 million reduction in the deficits of the goods account. The above-mentioned economic data clearly illustrates the severe economic shock that COVID-19 has had on the Bermuda economy, and the economic performance for the first 6 months of calendar 2020 was as expected. Based on preliminary estimates, it is estimated that GDP contracted by about 9 to 11% during this period. However, as previously advised, the government's COVID-19 fiscal plan has provided timely and targeted fiscal stimulus to various components of our economy as needed. The government has taken urgent action and appropriate action to reduce hardship and prevent business failures. Without these stimulus measures, the overall economic contractions in 2020 would have been a lot worse. We are still facing a lot of uncertainty, and in particular, there is a risk that the economic impact of the pandemic may be even worse or even more severe and longer lasting than currently anticipated. With contraction in many of the key economic data, such as visitor arrivals and spending, imports, construction activity, consumer spending, and employment income expected to continue, but at a lesser level of contraction than in the first 6 months of this year, the Ministry of Finance expects GDP in 2020 to be in the range of -7 to 9%. Throughout the economic disruption caused by COVID-19, the government has and will continue to make a concerted effort to stimulate domestic spending and maintain employment levels in Bermuda through the implementation of timely and targeted measures, with some of these measures being announced in our speech from the throne. In closing, I want to encourage everyone to please take this pandemic seriously. The past few weeks are a reminder that we must all continue to be vigilant. This recent uptake in cases means that we cannot be complacent. Please follow the guidelines and make every effort to protect our health and the health and well-being of this island. I remain confident that we will come out of this crisis stronger, and the team at the Ministry of Finance will continue to work very hard to strengthen our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Today, I will provide an update on 4 areas: the Employment Act and labor law changes, the Hamilton Dock dispute, financial assistance updates, and the Department of Workforce Development updates. On Friday, I tabled 2 critical pieces of legislation: the Employment Amendment Act 2020, and the Trade Union and Labor Relations Consolidation Act 2020. These two bills seek to strengthen the rights and obligations of employers and employees in Bermuda's labor force, as well as modernizing and clarifying areas of existing legislation to ensure that it is in line with international best practice. In addition, the legislation will revise the labor disputes mechanism in Bermuda. These legislative changes had substantial input from employers, trade union representatives, and the government over the years. Now let me highlight some of the major amendments to the Employment Act 2000. Probationary periods. Timeframes have been built into the legislation to avoid the practice of lengthy extensions of the probationary period. Employers will now be required to provide employees with a review of their performance midway through their probationary period so that employees are aware of areas that need improvement to enable full completion of their probation. Antenatal care. Employers are no longer required to work for one completed year before being entitled to paid time off from work to attend antenatal appointments. Bereavement. Persons for whom bereavement leave may be taken have been extended to include grandparents, great-grandparents, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Payments upon termination. Employers will be required upon the termination of an employee to pay any wages and other remuneration or benefits owed to the employee within 7 days or at the next interval that the employee would have been paid. Additions to the Act include definitions for independent contractor. The Labor Relations Manager may issue guidance surrounding the employment relationship as it relates to independent contractors to ensure that persons are not being incorrectly classified. Meal breaks. Employees are entitled to a meal break of at least 30 minutes after working continuously for 5 hours. And bullying harassment. Employers are required to have a policy against bullying and sexual harassment in the workplace that applies to all employees. The inclusion of this provision is to ensure that all workers are protected from bullying and sexual harassment at work and from colleagues. This addition follows guidelines set out by the ILO Convention on Violence and Harassment in the World of Work. The Employment Amendment Act will come into operation on 1st of June 2021 to allow all stakeholders to make the necessary changes to ensure compliance. Now we'll turn to the Trade Union and Labor Relations Consolidation Act 2020. This legislation is a consolidation of the Trade Union Act 1965, the Labor Relations Act 1975, and the Labor Disputes Act 1992. It is important to provide a brief summary of some of the more significant changes contained in this comprehensive and groundbreaking legislation. Tribunals and boards of inquiries. In the current labor legislation in Bermuda, there are the following 9 tribunals and boards: Permanent Arbitration Tribunal, Essential Industries Dispute Settlement Board, Trade Union Act Tribunal, Labor Disputes Tribunal, Sole Arbitrator, Arbitrator with Assessors, Independent Chairman with Arbitrator, Mediator, Board of Inquiry. Additionally, the Employment Act 2000 established the Employment Tribunal to hear employment-related complaints. This new legislation will streamline and consolidate the number of tribunals across all labor and employment legislation into one to be known as the Employment and Labor Relations Tribunal. This means there will be one tribunal to handle all employment complaints and related disputes. This is a significant improvement of our current state of affairs. This is a perfect transition into my comments on the recent dispute at the Hamilton docks. This legislation and the recent actions by unionized workers highlight the importance of good industrial relations and strong mechanisms for dispute resolution. As Minister of Labor, I was aware from the earliest possible point of the industrial dispute between Stevedore Services Limited and the Bermuda Industrial Union. I personally took time to proactively discuss the matter with both parties. in addition to the efforts made by the Labor Relations Manager of the Labor Relations Section. There was extensive dialogue in attempts to mediate. As the dialogue continued, it became clear that the parties were at an impasse and no further progress was being made. You will note that this was even while essential items were still being unloaded by dock workers. Therefore, in accordance with Section 11, as read by Section 4 of the Labor Disputes Act 1992, as Minister of Labor, I refer the dispute for settlement to the Labor Disputes Tribunal. Any breakdown in industrial relations is unfortunate. This is especially the case now as we fully consider the state of the economy and the effect that the pandemic has had on jobs. The government will continue to work with all parties involved to resolve this dispute. However, now that the matter has been referred to the tribunal, we must respect the disputes resolution process and allow it to take its course. I am confident that a resolution to the issue will be reached to enable the essential service to fully resume operations continually. Regarding the total number of financial assistance recipients, I can advise that as of November 20th, 2020, there is an estimated 2,163 persons receiving benefits. The breakdown is as follows. 141 are able-bodied unemployed, 769 are disabled, 223 have low earnings, and 1,030 are pensioners. I can also advise that the total number of children on the financial assistance daycare program is 117, which is unchanged from the previous period. At this time, I wish to address primary concerns with the Ministry and Department of Financial Assistance. There remain a number of applicants that failed to complete the application process in full. I cannot stress enough the importance of completing applications in full. This trend continues to occur, resulting in significant delays, time wasting, and most importantly, the inability of government to provide support to those in need. Oftentimes, the incomplete areas of application include unsigned forms, no social insurance numbers of landlords, no bank verification details for landlords. There have also been incidents of dishonesty, with some applicants attempting to hide assets or failing to report all members of the household. Despite the few who tried to take advantage of the system, most are honest citizens doing their best to provide for themselves and their families. To these persons, I want to remind you that the government is here to provide assistance in your time of need. But you must do your part and ensure all information is provided in the application in order for you to have a chance of receiving the benefit. Regarding individuals receiving redundancy package as a result are no longer on financial assistance, I encourage you to use the money wisely and responsibly. Use it to take care of your secure a brighter future for your loved ones. Unlike the COVID pension relief withdrawals, the redundancy packages are factored into the assessment calculations. This means that many persons will not be eligible for continued financial assistance awards set out in Section 3 of the Financial Assistance Regulations 2004. Clients for financial assistance and the sub are reminded that any changes in their circumstances must be reported immediately. Examples include changes of address, changes in banking details, change of employment status, or recent travel. At this time, I have the pleasure of updating the public on the success to date of the Department of Workforce Development programs. MEF Group of Companies Restaurant Training Program. For starters, I am pleased to announce that MEF Group of Companies Restaurant Training Program. The MEF Group of Companies, in partnership with the Department of Workforce Development, has launched a food and beverage waiter service training program. This program launched last week, Monday, the 23rd of November, and will run for 15 weeks and provide 12 Bermudians opportunities at both the entry level and professional level with on-the-job training. Participants will spend time training in rotation between the 12 MEF group of company restaurants. The objective of the program is twofold: to increase the number of qualified Bermudians in the hospitality industry and to further develop a sustainable career path and talent pool of Bermudians. On successful completion of the training program, participants will have earned training at the national standard that meets the requirements of Bermuda's tourism and hospitality industry. Furthermore, all 12 participants will be hired as full-time employees in various positions at each restaurant location. The success of this program, as well as others, will be replicated to add additional cohorts of training for Bermudians to gain employment as the economy begins to rebound. Now, on the subject of industry-driven training programs, many would have seen or heard the adverts ran over the last few weeks by the Department of Workforce Development, informing and inviting Bermudians to register for a number of training programs and occupations identified by industry stakeholders. This includes, but not limited to, cleaning, certified technicians, landscape gardening, computer literacy, digital literacy, certified administrative assistants, graduate training programs, and the Learn to Earn and food and beverage waiter server training programs. I am pleased to inform the public that all 7 of the accredited training programs were oversubscribed. It is anticipated that the program will continue to be offered along with a provision for sponsorship based on need and demand in occupations where Bermudians could be employed and guest workers have been repatriated. For further information on these training programs, please log on to www.bermudajobboard.bm or contact the Department of Workforce Development at 297-7714. I will now give an update on the apprenticeship training program and can advise that in partnership with the industrial trade industry, the Department of Workforce Development have increased the number of apprenticeship trainees. The breakdown is as follows: 2 at Bermuda Electric Light Company, 1 at E&G Carpentry, 1 at Brilliant Solutions, 2 at Universal Electric, 1 at Otis Elevator, 1 at Sunnyside Solar Systems, and 1 at Strikeforce Carpentry Company. This is a total of 9 new apprenticeship trainees. I am pleased at the progress made to date, but there is much work to be done before Bermuda and the world will emerge from this crisis. I have said this before, and it begs repeating. The people of Bermuda have entrusted this government to lead, but we will also work together. I would like to thank the entire staff of the Ministry of Labor and all its related departments for all the efforts and the dedication during these unprecedented times. For all those who are working 7 days a week, 12-hour days, we see the sacrifice that you are making and for the benefit of this country. We thank you for the time spent away from your families and home. At this time, I welcome any questions from the media.
Afternoon, Ministers. Thanks for having us. Jonathan Bell from the Gazette. Minister Hayward, I guess we had a question for yourself on the legislation that you just referred us to, where, and I quote, this is to do with on termination of an employee to pay wages and remuneration or benefits. Is this being introduced in light of what happened with Gencom in Fairmont, Southampton? Or was it already in the works before that?
It was in the works prior to that. The section that is being amended refers to termination. The redundancy portion will fall under another piece of portion of the legislation. As a result, this does not address the piece regarding redundancy, as that's governed by a different section within the legislation.
Right. Thanks for that, sir. Minister Dickinson, there's been a lot of questions to do with Fairmont Southampton since last Friday. I do apologize if any of my questions go over something that you've already raised in your statement. What we wanted to ask first off is, do we have any figures on how much has been paid and to how many people at this point?
I think, Jonathan, I referenced that earlier in my statement,
You
but
did,
just
didn't
for
you,
the
actually? Yeah,
sake
you
of,
did.
it's $9.7 million to 552 employees. Now, there's $11 million of redundancy payments, so about 89% of the value has been paid out to approximately 82% of the employees.
Thank you, sir. We got the impression, at least from Friday, in the House, that government's main recourse would be to recovering the money is to pursue each employee as and when they are paid. We wanted to check alternatively, could the government or the BIU as the bargaining agent sue Gencom for the money on behalf of the employees?
Jonathan, the claim for redundancy payments rests with the employees. And the employees, in the signing of their loan agreements with the government, have agreed to form a class. And so the employees are organized in as much as they have representation to pursue their claims against their former employer.
Sorry, what does class mean?
Instead of them suing individually,
Yeah.
they've joined together to form a class. I think in the United
right,
States you've
I
heard the
got
words
you.
class action.
The opposition had suggested putting a lien on the Fairmont Southampton. That's LIEN, to secure the debt. Is that any consideration, sir?
Jonathan, so I appreciate the opposition's support for the payments that we made. I have taken the opportunity before deciding to move forward with this to take advice from leading UK and Bermuda counsel. I'm not sure if the opposition leader has done the same. The government does not have an issue with respect to this matter with Gencom financially. It's the employees who have the issue with Gencom. The government has stepped in to provide assistance and will, by virtue of the agreements that we've entered into with the employees, pursue Gencom. The lien topic that was mentioned the other day, I guess you could think of a tax lien where someone owes the government money. In this case, Gencom owes the employees money, not the government.
Not the government, okay.
So it was a good idea, I think, in concept, but in practicality, it doesn't work. So we've taken careful legal advice on this, and we're comfortable that the steps that we're taking are the appropriate ones that will result in us getting the money back.
And that advice, I believe you said, was from local and overseas counsel?
Yes.
Right on, okay. Going back to talks with Gencom about these redundancies, in terms of getting an agreement to sign repayment, if there wasn't one, why not? And if there was one, well, I guess, can we revisit why there was not a specific agreement with Gencom that we would be getting paid?
Well, Jonathan, there were a series of conversations that were ongoing with Gencom around the payment of monies to employees. You will recall that originally the target date was the 23rd of October. That date slipped. Gencom engaged the government in discussions around providing assistance to them to make the payments. The government, in good faith, held a series of conversations with Gencom on the matter and decided that it could not, in good conscience, pursue those conversations to a natural conclusion. As a result of not being able to conclude an arrangement with Gencom, I made the decision that I would go and try to preserve the rights of the employees in as much as they had not been paid for several weeks, were waiting to receive their monies, and we had no certainty that Gencom would be in a position to pay them on November the 20th. So we mobilized and we provided a structure where the employees were able to get their money.
Right, thanks, sir. I believe you mentioned the renovations. We wanted to know if the renovations are going to go ahead as planned. It sounds like they could be scaled down. Are you able to say anything further on that part?
Well, The renovation plans are for Gencom to talk about. They are, as far as I know, trying to raise capital for the project. So whether they move forward in its current form or not, I don't know. They are the ones who would be responsible for providing some insight into what their future plans are.
And on the tails of that, is there any concern that this may affect their operations of Rosewood, Tucker's Point?
My sense is that the entity that acquired Fairmont Southampton, which is actually the company that owns it, is West End Properties, and Gencom owns West End Properties. I think the partnership of the company that purchased West End Properties may be different from the one that owns Rosewood's Tucker's Point.
Thank you, sir. And last one. So when Gencom bought Fairmont Southampton, almost a year ago now, obviously a different time, the government stated we supported the purchase and presumably there was due diligence on Gencom's finances. Has the decline in Gencom's finances, is it just a result of COVID, or is there anything else that has factored in there?
Jonathan, that would be a question that is best directed at Gencom.
Okay,
What I would say is this. We have had our own experience with the decline in tourism. Gencom owns a series of properties in the hospitality industry. There has been a similar decline in hospitality properties around the world. In light of them being heavily weighted towards tourism properties, it stands to reason that they may be having some challenges. What I will say is this, that the market, as I've been advised by my advisors, the market for lending to these kinds of companies has changed. The credit profile of a deal before COVID was one set of criteria. The credit profile for deals post-COVID are a different set. And so property owners, property investors need to recalibrate their expectations of what the market will accept accordingly in light of the market conditions.
So thanks for that. I think that does me. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Minister, is Gencom in trouble? Is the government aware whether Gencom is in trouble financially?
David, I don't know that question without having had an opportunity to examine Gencom's books, and I haven't. What I do know is that they have had a difficult time raising financing as a result of dislocation caused by COVID-19.
Okay, so, you were talking earlier about the potential scaling down of the renovations, of the work that was proposed. Is there some chance that they are not going to proceed, that the government has to step in to deal with it? Is that what you're basically saying?
What I'm saying is, inasmuch as they are unable to proceed, we need to have a plan to move forward with that asset. And so we started to think through what happens next, inasmuch as they are unable to proceed.
Okay, what do you think the chances are? Well, obviously, if you're thinking about it, it's obviously a chance that you think is definitely not just possible, but could definitely happen.
As a general rule, David, in the job that I have today, I always think about what the potential worst case scenario could be, even if things are going swimmingly well. That's part of my job, is to prepare for the worst, even if it doesn't come to pass.
So considering the financial position of the government, if Gencom can't proceed, how quickly can you move to do something with that property? It's been sitting up there now for some time. So would you be able to financially, would Bermuda be able to financially actually do something with that property in the near term?
I believe that there are a group of investors who would be supportive of the opportunity to take that asset and move it forward.
So there have been some discussions with other people?
I wouldn't say that there have been discussions. I'm just speaking from my own experience around the asset and what I think it would take to move it forward.
Okay. Minister, just about the whole labor situation, one of the, I think, points that were being raised by the opposition in the House with regard to the Labor Law Reform Committee was that there was a whole bunch of recommendations that came out of it, which they're not hearing. All they're hearing is what you're moving forward with. they were asking for those recommendations to be shared, the full breadth of them. Is that possible? Is that something that you might be prepared to entertain?
So that's not a normal part of the process. What we have is we have subcommittees under the Labor Advisory Council. The Labor Advisory Council would then discuss this, and these have been through a number of iterations. And so the original recommendations would have been passed to a previous minister, and what we're doing is just continuing the work that has been done. And so the recommendations moved by the committee does not speak to the extent of the changes that we're making to both pieces of legislation.
So that's a no then, right? That's a no. You're not going to share the recommendations with them. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay. You also mentioned that there were a few people who tried to take advantage of the system in terms of financial assistance. You said a few. Do you have a number?
I don't have an exact number.
I mean, a few means, a few, so I thought you might have had a specific number.
No, I don't have an exact number, but like I mentioned, the cases will be persons not reporting their full household composition, or persons not reporting all of their banking details and just disclosing some of their assets and not all of their assets.
Is there a penalty for that, by the way?
No, there is not.
Okay. So, okay. Thank you, Minister.
Okay, do we have any more questions from the media? All right, thank you all for attending. Have a great day.